Hi, I was given 3 months to do whatever I wanted for a school English project, so I decided to finally learn Unity so I could make a game. For context, I've had a bit of programming experience with Scratch, a software kinda meant for children. Since I'm probably no longer a child, I had chosen to install the C# programming language and then Unity, a game maker that uses it. Afterwards, I watched this Swedish man's tutorials for C# and passed with flying colors. I then proceeded to do nothing for 2 years. Yeah. Look, I've always wanted to make games, but I kind of have some commitment issues. I mean, just look at my 8 unfinished projects on Scratch, many of them only just a couple years ago. After all of that, I really jumped on the opportunity to use this project as a way to force myself to learn Unity, since last time I got a little confused, decided to play some video games instead, and then completely forgot about it. That's actually been a really common problem with me on many different occasions. So now I have a set goal, an enforced deadline, and a way to stop myself from giving up. It also gives me a reason to make a YouTube video on my experience, since, this is my final presentation for the school year. To start off, it was really important that I create a well-structured plan, as well as make sure that my goal was actually realistic. Most, if not all, of my previous failed projects did so because I lacked those two things. So, I created a solid plan, making sure to clearly state that I would keep my scope reasonably small. For step 1, make the plan. Step 2, familiarize myself with Unity. Step 3, create the idea for a game. Step 4, develop a prototype. Step 5, add elements. And then step 6, polish. And that's it! Well, now that the plan is done, I can cross off step 1. Nice! You know, I really feel good about myself now. I can move on to step 2 and start learning how to use Unity. It'll go great! I got this new structure that will make it so easy and comfortable to do. You can guess that those were some really unrealistic expectations. I started with Unity's built-in tutorial, which was completely useless. I then followed these really well-made tutorials by Brackeys, but I didn't even know how to open up the project file. I went scrounging around on the GitHub page, messing with zip files, all this stuff I had no idea how to work with. After a lot of hassle, I finally managed to get the project into Unity, only to realize the project version was old. Then I thought I was smart and tried downloading an older version of Unity, which was able to work for a bit, but it for some reason was different than the one used in the tutorial, which made it pretty much impossible to follow. Then I just lost motivation and the procrastination started to come and it was awful. The confidence I had before, it just plummeted. Everything I did didn't seem to work at all. I couldn't learn anything. It gave me a very visceral feeling of helplessness. This also made my procrastination worse because I had a fear of failing, and you can't fail if you don't try. I wasted so much time not working on it, feeling guilty, not knowing what to do. But there's a video I had watched a while back by a guy called Mark Brown. I mean, his videos are only a little bit better than mine. He actually documented his experience learning Unity, all from scratch, and it really inspired me to try and learn it for myself. And what do you know? Even after having watched all of that, I fell into almost the exact same trap as him. And while I fell flat on my face, he actually followed it perfectly, and then proceeded to not remember a single thing only a couple of weeks later. And for both of us, we got really discouraged, wanting to just give up and forget about the whole thing. In fact, my experience has many other parallels to his, so I'd recommend watching his video. But what he figured out was that he needs to take it very slow to learn the most fundamental concepts, and then get good at those before moving on. How I see it, you first need to create a foundation, then build the supporting framework, and from there, you can actually fill in the details and make something. Moving forward, I decided to restructure my goals. Instead of trying to learn many things at once with a fast-paced tutorial, I decided to learn one concept at a time, which is probably the best improvement I could have ever made. With this new approach, I was able to ward off my procrastination for just a bit and dive back into Unity. I opened up a new project and just started experimenting. First, getting a circle on screen. then getting it to fall, then having a platform it can hit, then angling that platform so that it can slide down. Not too much, yet somehow I made more progress in 30 minutes than I had in the previous 5 hours spent chipping away at my soul, and it felt good, but I couldn't do anything real. Like, I couldn't get my stuff to actually move when I wanted it to and do more interesting things. What I was missing was how to get my own code into the game. Slight problem. I forgot how to code with C#. Hey, don't blame me. It's been 2 years. So I spent some time relearning it all and learning a few extra things too, which took a while. But once I felt I had a good grasp on it, I tried to put it into Unity. Well, I did, but I made a lot of errors and I wasn't able to see where they actually were. So then I went through a whole big mess of trying to get this thing called IntelliSense and ended up having to switch to an entirely different software. But after a lot of struggle, I was finally able to write working code and then finally get something to move around. And wow, that was so relieving. After starting on it when? March 6th? And then now it's March 28th? I finally have something moving! Granted, from a lot of procrastination and frustration, but wow, it feels so good. This is a very important moment for me, since I finally surpassed that really difficult mental block that had been built. I finally had some foundational knowledge for Unity, knowing how to create scripts, and then being able to add them to the project to make my things do things. It really does sound simple, but if I didn't get this figured out, it would be physically impossible to make any more progress. There's still obviously a lot of room for learning. Like, I really don't know how to do anything yet besides put a script into my game. So, I continued with my approach of learning just one thing at a time. My research process was still a little bumpy since I wasn't too sure what concepts were more important than others. Something that really helped me was when I found Unity's official website. Turns out, it has many lessons on important Unity concepts. Looking back at it, I really should have started with this. Actually, now that I think about it, I didn't even watch all of these videos. A bunch of these could have been so useful earlier on. Anyways, this, as well as the unlimited information on the internet, helped a lot with learning some of the most important concepts of Unity. For example, how to manage game objects, kind of the containers for all game functionality, the Vector3 class for controlling movement of any of these objects, and the concept of referencing, being able to access other game objects in my code. Something that was also really helpful was the Unity forums, which is basically a place where people ask the exact same questions that I have, and then just get the exact answers I need. For example, I wanted to make a compass to stop me from getting lost, but the lookat function didn't work in 2D, and my attempts to use math were unsuccessful. Here, someone just dropped the exact code I needed, and like all good programmers, I completely plagiarized it. One of the most annoying things though with coding is the thousands of bugs. Most programmers know what I mean and are probably used to it, but for me, the easily stressed beginner that I am, it was pretty frustrating. Some are just stupid syntax errors since I'm a C# newbie, and others were admittedly a little funnier. I know one really annoying example of this was when I was trying to set up my camera. Since I am in 2D, the z-axis of the game doesn't really matter. At least that's what I thought. So in this really simple code, I was trying to change the location of my camera to make sure that I got the concept down. But every time I pressed the spacebar to move it, everything disappeared. I only figured it out when I started trying random things, and just happened to change the z-axis on my camera into the negatives. Turns out, the camera has to be at least 0.3 units behind everything else, and my code was putting it on the same z position. How does it even make sense in 2D? But regardless of all the bugs, it became pretty clear that, after a bit of time, I seemed to have gotten into a really nice flow. Although I was still procrastinating and struggling to keep myself from playing Tetris, each time I went back into Unity, I was making really significant progress. I learned how to make clones, how to randomize values, how to make timers, how to use colliders, how to make tiles, all of these really basic ideas that were getting into my brain one after the other. Don't get me wrong, it took me around 30 hours total to finally be prepared to make a game, but throughout it all, I was in a really solid groove. And most importantly, I didn't feel helpless anymore. I built back all of that confidence I had lost, and then built even more on top of it. after creating that foundation for myself beforehand, I was able to use it to create a good framework too. And then the last step is to use it to make something real, to make a game. Unfortunately, at this point, I was beginning to run low on time. With 30 hours of spaced out work and all the procrastination, breaks, and busy school weeks, my 3 months were coming close to an end. I started this project around the beginning of March, was officially ready to start the game on May 11th, and only had around 2 to 3 weeks before everything needed to be finished up, including the presentation. For this reason, I took another page out of Mark Brown's video. What he ended up doing was recreating an existing game that could reinforce everything he had learned with coding, but also wouldn't require thinking about the intricacies of game design. He chose to make Flappy Bird and a couple other simple games, but I decided I wanted to try to make Frogger. Seemed pretty simple enough for the time frame, and would also allow me to use a lot of the skills I learned. So I started a new project file, tried adding some of the main features, and found out pretty quickly that the game was not as simple as I first thought. There were many problems to solve. How do I make my frog move in quick hops, make the cars spawn in right at the start and then keep up the same rhythm, make the frog get velocity from the logs and turtles? All these really simple tasks, though, are way more complex to put into code. But you know what? That's exactly what made this game so much fun to make. I already had all the knowledge I needed to know to make it, so it was really just a matter of putting together all the pieces. Kind of like a big puzzle. Even for the moments where I did have to learn something new, like raycasting, I knew where to find the resources and had a strong fundamental understanding of how to implement it. I did still run into many bugs, more than I can count, which of course was still annoying. Heck, I managed to run into my first infinite loop, every programmer's nightmare. You good, bro? You good? You good? Oh, I know what happened! Oh, crap. It's going forever. Alright, I'm gonna have to close my computer. Oh dear. Thankfully I didn't lose much progress since my scripts were already saved. But despite that, despite the stress, despite all of the time crunch, despite the 27 hours I clocked in 12 days straight, I felt so good throughout the whole process. And best of all, I got something done that I'm extremely proud of. Like, look at this! Look at this! This is amazing! Oh my god! In my opinion, this project was an absolute success. The beginning was probably the lowest point. That feeling of helplessness and the fear of failing really held me down. But after getting through that mental block, it was a lot smoother of a ride, all things considered. I believe my total time to get this all done was around 60 hours total, but it was definitely well spent. For one, I got a lot of programming experience, and that is obviously really useful if I plan to aim my career in that direction. Secondly, I got experience in just feeling stuck, of having lost all of my confidence. Any other time I start to fail, my immediate reaction has always been to just give up. Though, I still do need to work on that. If it wasn't for being held at gunpoint by my teacher, I could have easily given up for another 2 years. Finally, it's just something that I'm flat out proud of. Like, man, I really just made a game with all this functionality that works. I finally finished a big project and actually felt good about it. Anyways, thanks for watching my video, or listening to my presentation, or whatever you would call this. I hope you enjoyed.